Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast, brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours, shine on. Toyota, let's go places. With Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. We are honored to be joined by the voice of the Rockford IceHogs, Dana Gray. Dana, how's your summer going, bud?
It's going all right. It's going real well. You caught me on a good day. We've got our Ice Hogs, actually we're called the Dirt Hogs, our softball playoffs starting up tonight. So this is perfect because I get to fight off all the nerves, which I'm feeling today, and chat with you guys. So yeah, a lot of softball and getting ready for the season. We just released our schedule for next year. So things are already starting to ramp up.
Well, as I recall, you didn't have a lot of time for your nerves to come to the surface as you took over as a play-by-play voice, because things happened rapidly as you got the job just before the season started. How was year one in the booth as you've had time now to reflect upon it?
It was really awesome. And I think I give a lot of credit to the staff out here and the folks at the Hawks too, and even the coaching staff and the training staff. Everyone was really aware of the situation that I was kind of thrown into, and very happily to be thrown into. But yeah, I think I got hired maybe 2 or 3 days before opening night and was quickly trying to memorize names and numbers and Levshunovs and Korchinskis and all that jazz, and try and learn a system here on the fast. But I think after my pants, delit from the fire after a couple of months, I really got to settle in, and it was a blast. It was really, really fun. I mean, you guys know just as well as anyone how exciting that mold was to get into. I think that was the first thought I had when I got the job, that it felt like, and it's different for every AHL and NHL team, but that what was happening at the AHL and still is really, really matters to the NHL club. They've put a lot of stock as far as prospects and resources into that. So to be thrown into a situation where, there were going to be a lot of eyeballs, and the players that were playing meaningful games here really were going to make an impact, that was cool. That was really cool. And I got to feel that pretty much from day one with guys like Slaggert and Nazar and all that crew. So it was really, really special. But yeah, as you said, I'm enjoying a little bit more of a runway here to feel a bit more prepared for early October this time around.
Well, Dana, I know in the days leading up to Rockford opening night, you also got thrown a curveball because the Hawks came back from their road trip, and Troy Murray was a late scratch for the home opener. And so we were trying to figure out how we were going to rotate our first period guest, second period guest. And I think we had Savoie, Chelly, and then you were our third period guy. So walk us through, the people that don't know, you were driving from home to Rockford and had to pivot to Chicago to come join us in the third period before then going on to Rockford. What was that day like for you? And I hope I provided some comfort on the post-game show when we were going back and forth together.
You absolutely did. That was one of my better memories of that day, getting to hang out with you guys there. Yeah, it was wild. I was driving so I was with the Cincinnati Cyclones last season. They were the ECHL affiliate of the Leafs, and I was driving up basically to move out here. And I got a call from my new boss at probably around 3:00 and asked if I had passed Chicago yet. And I started freaking out because I was already like late for a day. I didn't even know I was supposed to work. And he said, "Oh, well, could you peel off? I think they're looking for some help on color." I said, "Sure, that sounds more than okay. I can do that." And so I altered the GPS. Actually, I remember I was supposed to go into a virtual doctor's appointment just to up a prescription or something. And I called the guy and I said, "I think I might go be helping out with the Blackhawks, so I'm going to reschedule this." He was like, "Yeah, okay, totally, go do it." So we did that, and I got a call back from my boss, and he said, "Yeah, it looks like you're going to be doing the third period with Chelly and Savoie doing the first couple." And I'm like, "Okay, Chelly. That's Chelios for sure." And Savoie, my Boston mind went, Mark Savard doesn't really make sense. Savoie, maybe it's like a Hawks personality. And I quickly realized, oh my God, I'm following two future Hall of Famers, and then they're going to go to this shrub for the final 20 minutes. So that was very, very special. And I grew up kind of listening to John when he was in Worcester do games. So to be on the air for the first time for an NHL game with him was really special. And as I'm sure no surprise to you guys, he made me feel really comfortable and also kind of celebrated it too. All of you guys did. So yeah, that was a great intro to the organization. And it went all downhill from there, I'd say.
Yeah, the moral of the story is you never know when your number is going to be called, whether you're a player or a broadcaster. So
yeah,
let's get into some of those players that you were able to describe their action in the AHL last year. Let's start with Artemi Levchenko. What did you think of his development this past season?
Really, really interesting. And I think exactly how you would hope in a lot of ways if you looked at the bigger picture coming into his days, considering this was the start of his third season in North America. I think the growing pains were prevalent off the hop. I remember the first game that he made his debut, because he missed those first couple of weeks just coming back from that injury. We were up in Manitoba playing where the Jets play. In his first game, he had an assist. He was everywhere. But I think that's the word that came to mind. I was like, wow, he is just everywhere and involved in everything. There wasn't a lot of quiet defensive shifts. He was very noticeable, and in some ways really, really great. And in others, it was, certainly figuring things out. I think as the years went on, though, and I have to give so much credit to, I think, one, the coaching staff here in Rockford, but also, up with the Hawks as well. There's so many guys. I think if Brian Campbell has been, almost a daily, if not weekly, communicator with Levshunov, and what a resource to have for Levshunov and all these IceHogs guys. It's pretty frequent that on a random practice day, a guy like Chris Kunitz, Brian Campbell, Zach Sanford, even from last year, you've got 5 or 6 Stanley Cups on the ice with you helping out. So with Levshunov, the progress definitely came, I think, as his confidence grew. And then wildly, I think he played his best hockey when he was up with the Hawks. That's when I felt like he was his most engaged in every play. And I'm not totally sure what to attribute that to. I think it certainly clicked in that this was a really big opportunity, and was certainly kind of proud to see the way that he was able to show himself to such a wider audience. And then when he came back in the playoffs for us, I thought he was nails. He scored the overtime winner in game 1 of the playoffs against the Wolves in Rosemont. Just a phenomenal shot on the power play from the blue line, and he looked incredibly, incredibly comfortable. So all in all, as far as a first year as a pro, the tools are there. I think everyone can see that. Maybe things are still a little bit raw when it comes to fleshing it out into the pro game, but there's a reason that he's this top defensive prospect. He's so strong, and it feels like we're watching him starting to realize what he can do just more and more by every game.
If you talk to some of the goaltenders that graduate from the AHL to the NHL, they say that in the NHL, it's easier to track pucks and it's easier for them because there's just more structure in the NHL versus the AHL can be a little bit scrambly. And I wonder if Levshunov was one of those guys that benefited from, it was the first half of the season, there were a lot of growing pains in Rockford, but then he gets called up to the Blackhawks and you see the raw talent, you see the immediate impact that he makes. I wonder if subconsciously he just felt like he could just play his game. And he is a joy to watch, because there were so many times this year where you're like, he's below the goal line in the offensive zone, and then he's the first guy back. Like, he's just such an effortless skater. And I'm sure the team is going to work with him to put some parameters on his game. But for a skater like he is, and for his size and his raw ability, I mean, he was very fun to watch in Chicago, and I feel like his game translates better in the NHL than it does the AHL. Do you agree?
I think that's an excellent point. And don't get me wrong, this is a phenomenal league, and I've been so impressed with even just different teams, different opponents, and guys that are in this league that come in. But there is certainly some games. Maybe it's the back end of a 3-3, or you traveled last night from Grand Rapids and you're coming in the next day, and it doesn't have that sense that everyone maybe is up to 110% when it comes to the structure and the breakouts. And it was so cool to see that first game when he went in to Colorado and he's dealing with the Avs forecheck and McKinnon and big bodies bearing down on him, and he just looked so comfortable. He was making the little plays that we'd seen him making more and more of in the AHL. but I think you're bang on that things can get a little nuts at times defensively. And also, I think a really key point too is it's hard to get consistency when it comes to who you're playing with. And that's so important. I think any defender will tell you that when it comes to playing with a D partner. Of course, everyone's ready and willing to play with whoever, but when you can have that consistency playing with someone, that goes a long way. And there were a lot of call-ups last year due to injury, and also working guys in like Allen and Kaiser and Korchinski, Del Mastro. All those guys were up and down a little bit. So to have that consistency, I think, goes a long way too, and it just wasn't really there this past season for the IceHogs.
We thought we might see Frank Nazar go up and down a couple of times last year. That didn't exactly play out. He starts the season in Rockford among the league leaders, gets the call up, and just continued to stack great performances and great games and breakaways. And it was a really cool transformation Charlie and I witnessed in that locker room as kind of his arrival kind of marked the arrival of the change of the guard as far as the leadership and the voice, how the voice was being basically amplified in that room. It started to come from the young guys. And a lot of that was, I think, Frank Nazar's play. And then he continues that into the Worlds. You know, you had a front row seat to start the season with him. What did you think of Nazar?
He's such a gamer, right? Like, he's an awesome competitor, and not in this in your face, very boisterous way, but he's so competitive. I remember having a couple moments in the first 2 weeks of the season. He and Landon Slaggert were paired together pretty much as the top penalty killing forward duo. And at least twice a game when they were out killing a penalty, they developed out of nothing a phenomenal scoring chance. Like, it got to the point where it was crazy, where I was wondering why teams just weren't picking up that they were so willing to hunt pucks up at the blue line. And it felt like they had a 2-on-1 every game just together. And I think that's such a good testament to both their games, but specifically with Frank, the way he can read things. He's such a smart player, and obviously the flashes of speed and the skill is there too. But I was just really, really impressed because it felt like he was immediately a pro. And I know he had the taste of that last April too with the Hawks, and I'm sure that helped. But I was just really impressed with the way that he carried himself. And there was no feeling of, man, I should be in the NHL, or man, I'm getting 3 points every night. Why am I not called up? And he was only here for a little over 20 games, but every single public comment he could make, it was, I'm happy to be here. I'm learning what I can. And when my time comes, it will come. And it was really no surprise that when that time did come, he was able to really rise to the occasion. And I think even so too, you guys probably remember this better than me, but his first few weeks up in the NHL, you could definitely see that the talent was there, but I felt like he was hitting a lot of posts. He was robbed like 3 or 4 times of these saves that would end up on NHL.com, and he was on the wrong side of it. And it just didn't seem to deter him at all. Like, the points just continued to come. So I was a big Frank Nazar fan. I will continue to be, and only say positive things about the way that he can impact the game in all different facets of it. And a great guy too, just like really good dude, really good dude.
He's fun to talk to inside the locker room. He brings a lot of energy, and I think it rubs off on a lot of the younger players, but even some of the older players. I remember I had you on midway through the season on my Blackhawks live show on WGN, and you were talking about Frank Nazar and how he was part of a Rockford penalty kill that I think at the time was first in the NHL. And it was crazy because I parked that what you told me about Nazar and the breakaway chances that he was getting with Slaggert, and it carried over into the NHL. Like, he must have had at least 10 breakaways with the Blackhawks from the time that he was called up to the end of the season. And it became a thing where it was like Nazar had like 9 breakaways, but he only cashed in on one of them. And like, so sometimes it's the old cliche that you start to worry if the chances stop coming. It's like, if that carries over into next season and he's getting those chances again, odds are he's going to start bearing a lot of those as he gets more comfortable in the NHL, but also recognizes the tendencies of some NHL goaltenders. And I'm curious to see how that is going to carry over, because we saw it we saw him produce at such a high level in the Worlds too over the summer for Team USA. Yeah. And so it feels like I don't even want to put a ceiling yet on Frank Nazar because it feels like we're still learning what he could be.
I think and you're seeing different blogs and writers and rankings of breakout players to come, across the entire league, and feel like his name's popping up a lot there. And I totally agree. I think the ceiling is unknown with him. And, as far as draft picks comes, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a bigger home run when we're looking back at this in 5-10 years, because especially the second half of the Hawks season, I wasn't really watching him as a rookie. Like, it just didn't feel like you were maybe testing and critiquing his play the same way that you were critiquing some of the guys that were getting their first look in the NHL. Just looked like he fit. It was his spot and he had it. And that's not an easy thing to do, to make the jump, as you said. So, and I'm sure having Anders up there helped as well. Anders so much was just praising him, Slaggert, Savoie, those really speedy forwards when it comes to penalty kill and what a weapon they can be. So to have him already with that in the back of his head when Frank made the jump up there, I'm sure made a big difference too.
If the CHL and the NCAA had the rules in position that they have now a couple of years ago, we probably would have seen Kevin Korchinski go from the WHL to maybe a year in college and then come to Rockford. Instead, he came to the Blackhawks because he couldn't go to the AHL. And then he spent most of last season in Rockford. Up and down, not a linear path here to the NHL. What did you see from Kevin Korchinski?
I think there's been a lot of pressure, and I'm not sure how much of that is just from the noise that surrounds him as a prospect. It feels like a lot of Blackhawks Nation, kind of implores him and wants him to be maybe a little bit further along than he actually is. First off, I think he's a fantastic player, and I know for a fact that going into last season, he was asked to play a little bit of a different role, kind of the opposite of, I think, the conversation that was had with a guy like Ethan Del Nastro, who was really asked at the start of last season. I mean, he was an all-star 2 years ago in the AHL. He was putting up points like crazy. And this was the season that he really solidified his defensive side, I think, in the pro game. For Kevin, I think it was a little bit different. I felt like there was more of a push on the back to be more confident, take more rushes, feel like this is where you're supposed to be in the pro game. And I think that really helped his mindset, especially in the second half of the season. His playoffs were awesome. He had a point in his first 4 pro playoff games, a couple of just gorgeous seam passes that you really only make when you're feeling it. And the size and the strength is always going to be, I think, a little bit of the hesitancy with him and making sure that his game can transition to the NHL. And I know he's worked on that a lot over the last couple of years and trying to pick up a few more pounds and add a little bit more muscle. But I'd say for most part of the Rockford season, he was that top defenseman, that if it was a late game situation, if it's, even quarterback in the power play, a penalty killing, he's out there when it mattered most. So he got some really, really valuable minutes. And I would think that you guys would agree that transitioned pretty well to his 2 stints, especially at the end of the season in the NHL. I think of that goal that he scored in Boston. Like, that was just like a pure defensive goal scorer's goal. That's kind of exactly what you want from him. So that was really exciting to see. And also a guy that I was curious coming into the year, how's this guy going to fit in? Like, he just played the entire year in the NHL, and like you were saying, with those rules, if they were different, maybe that wasn't his path. Now he's going to go play pretty much the entire year in the league below, after seeing how it is in the in the NHL. And I never felt any sort of disdain. He's so close with a lot of the guys. Him, Gavin Hayes, and Samuel Savoie are basically the 3 musketeers, 3-headed monk, whatever they are inseparable. They live together. They spend 90% of warm-ups together, twirling around on the ice. So I think all that sort of stuff helps as well, that he's so close with this class. And he was a really great player to have around. And I'll be interested to see how he fits into the mold this next season.
Yeah, that size and strength element that you mentioned, every time I see him, I'm like, man, there's still so much frame that he could fill out, which I think is encouraging, because you start to project what he could be once he does get more muscle and he's never going to be a guy that's boxing guys out defensively and he's, being that stay-at-home defenseman. Clearly, offensively is where his skill set is, and that's what has made him the number 7 overall pick a few years ago. The thing that was interesting that we kind of observed here is anytime Artemi Levchenko was in the NHL, it felt like Kevin Korchinski's game elevated in Rockford. And I don't know if that was because there's only so many minutes that can go around playing that all-around role in Rockford. So maybe when Levshunov was in the NHL, it freed up Korchinski to want to step into that role and thrive. Is that, am I connecting the right dots there, or how did you see it evolve in real time?
I think so, yeah. There was definitely a rotation, even when it just came to QB1 on the power play. There were a couple of times, actually, when they were both down there that they chucked them both out. I couldn't remember the last time that we seem, I guess, so spoiled a little bit over the last 5 years. You don't really see teams throw out 2 defenders on a power play unit a whole lot. But they played a lot together. And, yeah, when Artie was up, Kevin was slotted into that role. And I think certainly understood that he was going to not only get more minutes, but when it came to offense coming from the defense, it was really on him. Also kind of a good point to shout out a guy that played a lot with Kevin and a lot with Levshunov and will continue to do so if so be the case. And Kevin Fitzgerald, who's a guy that played a lot with the Chicago Wolves in the AHL. He's kind of been an AHL journeyman. And if I had to pick one person that I would hope could get their look in the NHL sometime over the next stretch, I hope it's someone like him, because he's so darn reliable on the back end. And he played with Kevin and Artie for pretty much the entire season and helped them a ton on and off the ice. And there was a moment that I remember witnessing specifically with Artie after the team was knocked out of the playoffs against Milwaukee in Game 5. And, obviously that's a moment where folks are a little bit down and you've just been shocked in overtime. And Artie was definitely working through some things. I think he, was really bummed out that the season had just come to an end. And I saw Kevin go right up to him, pick his head up, gave him a big hug, just said, "I'm so proud of you for everything that you accomplished this year." And I think those sorts of players just can't be looked past enough. And he re-upped for a 2-year deal with the IceHogs actually a few weeks ago. So I'm super excited about that. And I know I've strayed a little bit off the Korchinski, but that was the guy that was always paired with one of those two, whether they were up or down, and making sure that their production was trying to stay as consistent as possible.
Drew Commesso had a sensational finish to the season. I think it coincided with the trade of Seth Jones and the acquisition of Spencer Knight. I don't know if, that was motivation for Drew to say, like, okay, hold on. I've got a relationship with this guy. I remember him from the national development team. Yes, he was a first round pick, and he's going to change the way this organizational depth chart looks. Do you think he used it as motivation at all? And was that maybe the catalyst to his strong finish?
If he did, it would be the biggest coincidence, at least of last season. I've asked him a couple times of him about it in interviews, and especially right after. And Drew is an incredibly team-focused guy. It takes a lot to get him to talk about his own performance in a positive light, which was something hard to do, especially when he was playing so well last spring. But we were down in Tucson when that trade went down. I think it was about like 6:45 local time. The game was about to start at 7, and it was Drew's first start. He'd been injured for about a month. He got injured in a game against Texas about 4 weeks before, and this was him making his way back after the lower body injury. And I remember being down in the tunnel. It was just after warm-ups, and you could kind of feel like word was buzzing around. It was a massive deal, obviously, in the organization. And I looked over at Drew to see if he had found out, if he'd known, and someone mentioned it up, and he kind of perked his head and he said, what happened? And told him, and he kind of just had this moment of watching me. He goes, okay. And he just kind of sat with it for a second, then just walked out. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, this guy's either going to put on a 45 save shutout or he's going to give up 5 goals in the first period. And I really thought it was going to be the former. And it was. He came out and played a fantastic game. They beat a really good Tucson team in overtime, and he was fantastic. It was the best I'd seen him. And yeah, and then he went on that run where he was the best goaltender in the American Hockey League for the last 2 months of the season. And into the playoffs, he had a save percentage up close to .930. He had a playoff shutout. He was so dialed in. So yeah, I think it's impossible to ignore the coincidence of it. And it was really, really cool to see the way that he took that and used it as, if you want to say it was motivation, or just helped him lock back in, because it was the best that he'd looked all season. And I think the best he'd looked as a pro. And I hope it continues into next year too.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what he can do going into year 3 as a pro, with the confidence that he had ending the season, how he can, like, I truly think he could be one of the top AHL goaltenders next season if we're looking at the numbers and stats. All right, give us a name that maybe had a quietly good season but didn't get enough love. Like, are there any names that jump out to you this past season, specifically in the prospects circle? I know the veterans play important roles of helping the prospects get there, but give us a name or two that had a good season but didn't get enough love as they should have.
I'm going to give you 2, because the first one I've been trying really hard to make it not so quiet, and I hope it's not. It's on the verge of not being so quiet. But Samuel Savoie is one of my favorite players I've ever watched play hockey. It is an absolute joy to watch what he does on the ice every night. He is a combination of spark plug, menace, just a pain in the butt to play against, and he's so talented. I remember talking with you probably at the start of last year, Charlie, that he'd been getting a lot of Andrew Shaw comparisons, and that's a pretty lofty name when it comes to the lore in this organization to be compared to. And I think everyone, I'm sure, would be a little hesitant to hear that comparison, but I get it. Like, after watching a full season, I really get it. The way that his year started was a lot of unknown. He had suffered he had a broken femur just a year before in a preseason game in a really awful, painful way. And we actually just chatted this summer. We're doing kind of a catch up with the guys over the summer season. And he was talking about going into last year, I didn't know what I was going to be able to do. Like, that's such an injury where gaining your confidence back in your body, I'm sure, is just really difficult. And he ended up being the only IceHog to play every single regular season game, every single playoff game. And as the year went on, he just said that he felt better and better about his body. So I love him. If I had to put, as much of a bet on someone to be a successful, long NHL career, I think it's him, because he brings so much to the table when it comes to that energy getting under your skin, and also a really talented player. And he's also just like a nutcase in the best way. He's around the locker room doing the wildest, craziest stuff. He is always smiling. He wore the same darn t-shirt for 250 days in a row. He's just that kind of guy. He's phenomenal. So that's my number one for sure. And my second, we only got him for a few weeks, but Aiden Thompson was really great to watch when he came in at the end of the season. He signed with the team, only played a couple of regular season games, and just at the end of the year after Denver was knocked out of the NCAA playoffs, and then he got playoff time with us too. And from the immediate jump into the lineup, he drove his line with Cole Gutman, who's a really talented forward, and he was also out there a lot with Zach Sanford, who's a guy that doesn't really need much to be said about it. He was driving that line. He's so fast. Immediately, he was the fastest player on the ice and looked uber confident. So I'm really excited to see what a full pro year can look like with him. Obviously, that Denver program just churns out successful NHLers. And I think we're hearing more and more the conversation about specific college programs and how they translate their guys into the NHL. And that's a big check mark when it comes to the Pioneers. So looking forward to more from Aiden, and also a really stellar guy. I remember chatting with him after maybe his first or second game, and I just went to grab him for post-game meeting. I said, hey, great debut, man. That was great. And instead of kind of just doing, oh, thanks, man, he's like, oh yeah, what'd you think? Like, really, what'd you see? And you wanted my critique and opinion of how his game, and we chatted about it for 10 minutes, kind of what what I saw and how he was fitting into the system. And that was really cool, because immediately that's telling me that this is someone who really, really wants to learn, but just doesn't know who to learn from, because obviously I don't know what on earth I'm talking about. But I'm sure he's the same way with the coaches. So Aiden Thompson's a fun one to look out for.
Jared Nightingale takes over as head coach of the IceHogs. Great background, player in Rockford, assistant coach in Rockford, comes in with a lot of cachet. You'll have some new faces as well. Nick Lardis, notably coming off an incredible season last year. From the newcomers' perspective, who are you most excited to get to know and to watch?
Yeah, really excited to have Nightingale aboard. When that news came out a few weeks ago, I had a handful of random texts from people that I've crossed paths with in the hockey world, and all had the same, "you are going to love this dude" mentality, which seems to be the case with the players here in Rockford that got to play for him when he was an assistant under Anders and co. So really excited to have Jared, and a guy that is very much willing to build roots here and do what he can to build a winning team. So excited to have him. And yeah, I think it's hard to look past a guy like Lardis, right? It was cool hearing some of his quotes coming out of Devon Camp of him talking about that season, and understandably that's not something that's probably going to be replicated when it comes to this level. But that's certainly the one guy that I'm really, really looking forward to. Tage Harding, too, is another name who came and joined us really late at the end of last season and didn't get the chance to play in playoffs, as far as just from the numbers game when Del Mastro and Korchinski and Levshunov all came down. I'm excited to see what a guy like him can do with a full slate. He's 6'7". He's got an incredible reach, obviously. Came out of Providence College last season, and another one of those later draft picks that we haven't heard a ton about. But I'm looking forward to see what he can do with a full season on the back end.
I'm fascinated to see how Nick Lardis develops and how the transition from the OHL to the AHL is for him, because now there's no Cole Gutman, who is kind of an offensive driver for the IceHogs. It feels like Lardis is going to get that first crack to step into that Cole Gutman role and play the first line minutes, play on the first power play. And I'm just fascinated to see how that transition is going to go for him, because if he can remotely resemble what he was producing in the OHL, I mean, he's going to be knocking on the door of the NHL door sooner rather than later.
And I hope that people understand that, and he's allowed to just have his entry into pro hockey without this 70 goal, feeling on his shoulder from everyone, and that pressure, because obviously the talent is there. And yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of been a lot of hit or miss, if maybe you'd agree, when it comes to immediately coming into the AHL out of the OHL. We've seen instances where it can be really easy, and in other instances where it's far more of a feeling out process. So he's going to get plenty of opportunity. That's certainly something I learned really quickly taking on this job last fall, is that the communication from here to Chicago is constant, obviously, when it comes to practices and reporting back. And they're going to make sure that the guys that they really want to get looks at are getting the top looks in situations and playing with those more talented players. So I'm sure he's going to get plenty of ice time, and heck, maybe it'll be the kind of feeling like a Nazar, where he's here for 2 months and he lights it up and he's gone before we know him. I remember when Nazar got called up in December, and someone in our office said, "Oh, do you think we'll have him back before the All-Star break?" And I was like, I don't know if we're ever going to see that guy again. Like, he was named the All-Star for the festivities in February, and I got a lot of questions of what happens now. And it's like, he's getting replaced. He's going to be on a road trip in Ottawa at that time.
Anything else you have for Dana, Charlie?
No, I was going to add, my last question was going to be if you could pick a breakout player going into this season, but it feels like Aiden Thompson, the way that you were building him up and seeing a full sample size of him, is probably going to be your answer. But is there another name that you could potentially throw out as a potential breakout player for the IceHogs going into this coming season?
I'll chuck Gavin Hayes in there too. That's a prospect that got a lot of love, I think, coming into this past season. He got screwed out a little bit. He got a tough injury They kept him out for 2 months for December and January, which is when I saw a lot of the guys that were rookies really start to get comfortable. You've done this for a couple of months. You've learned your routines. And he kind of had that pushed back a little bit. And in his playoffs in the last month of regular season, after he came back, he started to figure it out. He's a pure goal scorer. And I'm still waiting to see how much that can translate to this level. He's got an excellent shot and a guy that certainly works really, really hard. His just rookie year, I think it's tough to analyze because of that injury that he had. So I hope that he's a breakout player and a guy that can get out on a line with him and Savoie. We're playing a lot together, and they're super close off the ice too. So maybe those two guys can help each other out in their sophomore seasons a little bit.
A lot of talent in Rockford, including the broadcast booth. Dana Gray, thank you very much. Congrats on season 1 in Rockford. We look forward to more frequent conversations as the rebuild continues to bear some fruit now. We're starting to see players that have been drafted perform at a high level at the AHL and the NHL level.
It's exciting times in Rock Vegas. Thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, it should be a great year. We got the All-Star Classic here too for the first time in the Midwest in over 20 years. So it's awesome to see Rockford getting a lot of love from here in Illinois and afar, and great to be on with you guys.
That's Dana Gray. For Charlie, I'm Pat. Thanks for watching the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast, brought to you by Toyota. We'll catch you next time.